Hi everyone, I'm Joe. Today it's time for me to do my monthly reading wrap-up for March 2021. However, before I get on talking about the books, I'd just like to explain the fact that the reason that there has not been any uploaded videos from me since my February reading wrap-up on the last day of February is because of a hardware failure with my PC. In particular, the motherboard of my PC, which is this thing, died on me on the last day of February. And it took me almost 3 weeks to get new parts due to a component shortage that seems to be globally with PC components. So I was without a PC, which was frankly annoying and also very irritating and problematic. So anyway, I have finally managed to get parts. I have a working PC, and the advantage of not having a working PC for 3 weeks is I managed to get a lot of books read. I have read 18 books in total in March, which is frankly enormous, and without further ado, I'll get started talking about the books. The first of which is Red Moon, written by Kim Stanley Robinson. Now this is a climate change science fiction novel. This is, or at least was the last time I checked, his latest science fiction novel. I have so far generally enjoyed almost all of Kim Stanley Robinson's books. I've actually read the majority of them at this point. This is one set on, unsurprisingly, the moon. The red of the title comes into play because there are two main factions, America and China. Basically, somebody is murdered on the moon, somebody gets accused of it, and there's a lot of political tension and personal tensions between certain sets of characters and governments and such, and very quickly it ends up with the action going back to Earth, and to be honest, the majority of the book is set on Earth, not the moon, despite the title. That just seems to be the pivot point for the novel. And whilst I did enjoy this novel, I didn't love it. Do not expect this to be something with the title, Red Moon. You might think of obviously the Mars trilogy by Robinson, which was personally something that I thought was amazing. This is not that. This is something more milder, and the one flaw with it is the fact that it feels less epic, or sort of less larger scale than a lot of Robinson's books. This feels very minor, which is not a major problem, I suppose, but I've got a certain way of expectations that I expect from him, and this wasn't it, frankly. It was good, but nothing amazing. If you like Kim Stanley Robinson, I would definitely recommend this though, because it was a really interesting novel overall. The next book that I read was actually 3 books, and that is the Science in the Capital trilogy, also by Kim Stanley Robinson. The 3 books that make this trilogy are 40 Signs of Rain, 50 Degrees Below, and 60 Days and Counting. This also happens to be climate change science fiction. For the record, Red Moon was not climate change science fiction, I misspoke there. This is set almost entirely around Washington and surrounding areas in America, Washington DC that is. And this is essentially the sort of government and financial aspect of science development and science project development. It's different from what I've read before from Robinson. Different in an interesting way. I like the overall plot, and I like the ideas it is speaking about. I was less keen on the individual stories of the characters who are trying to solve the problems in the novel, because this is basically where climate change is radically taking effect, and Washington DC is suffering extreme winters and pretty much a catastrophic climate change event, and characters are trying to fix this, but of course with government taking place, with money coming into play. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to spend a lot of money, or at least don't want to spend money on things they can't directly profit on. So it's an interesting novel talking about this sort of process of science and how it gets developed. I did enjoy it. I didn't love this trilogy, but it was well worth reading, and I am glad I did. And indeed I will reread this in the future, because there are certainly some interesting ideas that I did enjoy, and I would recommend it overall if you like Kim Stanley Robinson. The next book that I read was Monday Starts on Saturday, written by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. And yes, this is one of the Yellow Spine masterworks. Now this is a novel, quite simply, where it starts off with a young guy, a programmer. He's driving along one day and he picks up a few hitchhikers, brings them to this small village basically. They find accommodation, and but it turns into a rather strange novel, because this area is not quite what it seems. It's more sort of technology based. There's a lot of technology development. The chapters, or at least the main segments, go over time, and it's a novel that I can't actually explain much better than that, even though that probably wasn't a very good description anyway, because that's the problem. I didn't understand this novel. I liked the writing style of it. It was not my first novel by them. It won't be my last. I liked their writing style yet again, but I didn't understand what they were trying to say with the novel. It felt very confused and very jumbled for the most part. And honestly, after the first probably quarter of the book, I was lost as far as the plot was concerned, which is a great shame, but it just happens to be one of those things where the book is good, it's good, you just can't understand why it's good. Actually, I would recommend this, and hopefully you can actually understand it better than I did, because I really didn't at all. The next novel that I read was Sirius by Olaf Stapledon, and yes, this is the second and I believe final SF Masterwork book. The premise of this is actually quite simple. In a fairly rural area, which I believe is Wales, is it? I could be mistaken there. A scientist essentially is working on increasing the intelligence of animals, in particular dogs. This one particular dog takes to his sort of formulas and his experiments, and basically this dog gains the ability to essentially have almost fully human-like intelligence. It can understand humans, it can reason, it can think, it can do most things what humans can, or at least what they should be able to, if they can actually stop being idiots. And indeed, the dog is in an interesting and rather unpleasant place in a way, because of course it's no longer just merely a dog, so it can't really understand other dogs, but of course it's not a human. It can't talk, of course. It can understand but not talk, and it knows human society to a degree. It's in this very weird middle ground, and the middle ground is actually where the whole book is taking place, because the dog doesn't fit in with anybody around it really, apart from the family of the scientist who gives it its intelligence. And it's a very strange novel. It's very dark. I enjoyed the start of it, but frankly it was so dark and so sort of gloomy in feel that frankly by the end of the novel I was quite glad to have read it, because this was not a cheerful novel. This was a bit frankly depressing, which wasn't ideal at that moment. So I'll say it's well worth reading, but maybe read it when you're in a better mental place than I was. I was already frustrated by events in the real world, so this wasn't the right book at the right time. Quite the opposite. So yeah, I would recommend it if you can go with it. The next book that I read was Lies Inc., written by Philip K. Dick. Now the premise of this novel is quite simply, there is another world which is classed, as far as the authorities go, as a utopian planet. Anybody that wishes can go there. However, it is a one-way trip. Once you go to this utopian world, you cannot come back ever. It's not physically possible. And the main character is curious about this other world that is apparently utopia. He would like to go there, but he's obviously unsure because there's things on Earth that he likes. And it's a very strange novel. I mean, this is Philip K. Dick. He wrote some of his novels, and this is not as an exaggeration, under the influence of various drugs. He was known for that, frankly. This was not one of the most sort of drugged out novels that he wrote. Some of them are so bizarre that I don't understand a word of what he's trying to say. But it's certainly not one of the more clearer novels that he wrote. The ending was strange yet again. I've said this before with Philip K. Dick on multiple occasions. He doesn't end books very well. This isn't quite as bad as some of them, but it's certainly not a nice, clear, concise ending. This is somewhere in between. I somewhat liked it, but I didn't love it. As for recommending it, I would say if you like Philip K. Dick, then again, I would recommend reading it. I mean, I'm glad I read it. How often I will reread it? Yeah, unlikely, to be honest, that I will read it more than maybe once at some future point. That will probably be it forever. But you know, it does have a certain something. Philip K. Dick has a certain way of writing. His prose is interesting when you can actually understand it, and his characters are usually strange, but also somehow strangely compelling in a odd, bizarre way. You want to see what is made of these characters. So overall, I did sort of like it, just not loved it enough to recommend it. The next book that I read was The Invincible, written by Stanislaw Lem. Now, this book is one that I've been meaning to read for many years because, on a very personal level, this is the last book a friend of mine recommended to me in 2013 before his untimely and surprising death. And indeed, for the record, the friend who recommended me this book is actually the reason for my channel now, in case you're curious. So this was a very important book for me to read. He said this was a very interesting book that he thought I would like, and I'm very happy to say he was not wrong. I really enjoyed this novel. The premise of it is actually quite simple. Overall, quite simply, a spaceship and its crew go to a planet to investigate the disappearance of its sister ship, which went missing some months or years before, I can't remember which now, and they are not sure why the ship disappeared. It just lost contact completely overnight, but they want to investigate it and find out, was it natural, was there something dangerous on the planet, and they want to know obviously the details because of course spaceships like this are very expensive, so they want to know whether this planet is worth going to, because it's a planet that might be habitable with a little bit of alteration. But of course, if it's dangerous, that might not be an option. The overall concept and the characters were really interesting. There is a set of characters, all the crew of the ship. They are investigating the planet, what they find there, and the way they interact whilst investigating is frankly really interesting. The planet itself and the way Lem describes the world is frankly fantastic. It's very vivid and concise for the most part, but some parts are left quite dreamy and open. That mixture is one that I really enjoyed, and I just really cannot recommend this novel enough. This was a really fun novel. It's a fairly short novel as well, so if it sounds like something you may be interested in, I would recommend it because it's fairly fast to read, but it's fun, well written, some amazing ideas, extremely strong writing, and frankly I can't recommend it enough. As I said, it's just a very good novel overall. The next novel that I read was Devil Star, or The Devil Star, written by Joe Nesbo. This is set in Norway. This is a detective, sort of hard-boiled detective thriller, basically. I think it is classed as. I'm no expert on detective thrillers, frankly. This is one of the fairly small number that I have read in my life. I have enjoyed Joe Nesbo, and specifically the Harry Hole mysteries, which these are. These are set in Norway. Unsurprisingly, that's where the author is from, although he now lives in England, the author that is. And the main detective, Harry, in this book, he is investigating a series of what becomes a serial killer. Of course, serial killers are a big thing for any police force because they are a massive thing for publicity, and they have to make sure that they investigate them correctly, and of course they want to catch the serial killer. And this goes in some very strange and weird directions, as you would expect from this sort of novel. You know, there are twists and turns. Some of them you can predict fairly easily, some of them you can't exactly what you could expect from a good, solid novel. I really enjoyed this. The character of Harry is really good. He's a alcoholic or ex-alcoholic who's verging on being alcoholic again. He is a very good detective, however. His superior knows how good he is, so he's always trying to give him as much leeway as he can to do his job, because frankly he's one of the best at that on the force. He is sort of respected by his colleagues, but sort of not, because of course his alcohol problems are a problem and have been known in the force for years as well. So the character is a conflicted character. You sort of like him for the most part, but at times he can be just as annoying as he knows he is. The character himself, Harry, says that he's annoying, and he knows that he's not a brilliant person, but he tries to be. And that's an interesting mixture compared to obviously what he's doing with investigating murder things. It's just a really interesting novel, well written, and I would recommend this. This is actually one of my favourite novels. I haven't read a lot of them by Nesbo at this point, but it's definitely one of my favourites by him so far. The next novel that I read is The Memory Wood, written by Sam Lloyd. Now this was actually a Christmas present, only for the Christmas just gone in fact, and I thought I'd better actually read the books from my sister for a change, because she keeps buying me books for presents for years and it takes me years to read them. I thought it's about time I actually try and read some of them. So this is quite simply a young girl is taken to a chess tournament by her mother. She forgets something from the car. She goes out to get this item and she gets kidnapped, bundled into a van and driven away. The police get involved. They are investigating. The girl is taken to the Memory Wood, a location which you do not know where it is. This is set in England, by the way. Her people that is with the girl there, her kidnappers, are strange, as you would expect from kidnappers, especially with the title of the Memory Wood. They were a bit unusual, let's say, in certain respects. They are quite disturbing people, and the reasons for them kidnapping her is also strange, let's say. And this is a very dark and grim novel. I like the writing style, but again, like many other books, frankly, in this video, I didn't love it as a novel. It was just too dark and gloomy for my taste, to be honest. Which was a shame, because the writing was really good. It's just the darkness of it just didn't appeal and made it, frankly, a slog. Even though it's not a long book, this took a while to read through. And by the time I finished, I thought, finally, I finished the book. Let's just have a quick think about it so I know what to say now. And call it a day. I'm not going to be rereading this. I probably won't even keep the book, in fact, because, like I said, the writing was good, but it's so dark that it could count as anything else. I can't let that go. The darkness of it ruined the book for me, frankly. It's too dark and it's too strange for my liking, frankly. The next book that I read was a Christmas present from the same sister last year, and that is The Last Hour, written by Harry Sidebottom. This is part of a larger world with the same main character, although it's not related to any of those books, I believe. They are sort of separate adventures, essentially. The idea of this one is, it is set in Roman times. The main character is a well-respected soldier, essentially, in his own right. However, he is found at the start of the book to be standing at the top of a Roman building, getting hunted down by people, and essentially he has to escape from them. And he has to escape, survive, and get back to the Emperor, because in 24 hours on the following night, the Emperor will be murdered, assassinated. and somebody else will take over. And he's trying to stop that because he's sort of patron, and the reason that he's got such a good position is because of his relationship with the current emperor. So this is a fast-paced sort of action thriller, essentially, and one that I really enjoyed. It's not a complex novel. There are some mild twists and turns, but frankly they're not that complex in any way. It's just about the way it is written. The character and the world that inhabits, obviously being Roman times, is quite unusual because it's a thriller but in Roman times. It's a little bit different for me personally, but one that I really enjoyed. The main character is really interesting to read about because he tries to be stoic and sort of try to withstand anything he can, but he's not actually as invincible as he would like to think. And indeed, he's not as young as he once was as well. He knows that, he mentioned several times that he's no longer the sort of super young, very fit soldier that he was. He's still very good, in good shape and stuff, but he's not quite the same as he was. He still struggles a little bit more now, which is an interesting little addition as well. Overall, I would recommend this because it's just fun, fast paced, the writing is solid, the characters are fun, and the world is frankly really interesting. This is fantastic world building, obviously being Rome in that sort of time, but this is a Rome with an action sort of perspective on it. All the areas where he goes are ones where he can hide or leap over things, and it's really quite curious overall, and one that I really did enjoy overall. The next book that I read was Child 44, written by Tom Rob Smith. Now this is a fiction novel. They actually made a film of this about 4 or 5 years ago, roughly, that I remember, starring Tom Hardy, I believe it was, as the main character, who is called Leo Domidov, I believe his name is. I could be slightly mistaken there. This is set in Russia at the very end of World War II, basically under sort of Stalin ruled Russia. It's a very harsh and brutal Russia, of course. The secret police and the sort of militaristic aspects and the state-run aspects of Russia are very much a massive factor in this. This is quite simply the case of somebody is apparently murdered as a child, but Russia doesn't have any crimes, at least officially, because if they have crimes, then the country is not perfect, and they must be the perfect sort of country for its people. So they don't claim it's a crime. And indeed, the main character Leo, who is a detective, he investigates briefly, but he's told basically that he can't investigate it because it's not a crime after all. There can't be crime. Russia's too good to be capable of crime at the time under Stalin's Russia, and he's told to drop it. Frankly, he obviously doesn't drop it, and he investigates more. This leads to all sorts of problems for both the government and him. A lot of problems for him, in fact. And this is a novel that I really enjoyed overall because the character of Leo, and indeed his superiors and the other people in the services that he deals with, are really interesting characters, because this is a world run by rules, but nobody's sure who sets the rules. You're just told this is what you're allowed to do, this is what you are not allowed to do, and there's a lot more restrictions than there are allowances. And it's a brutal world, quite dark, but the writing is fantastic. I'm going to do a separate review of this, in fact, because I really did love this novel. It is fantastic writing. The world is remarkable, it really is, and I can't recommend this enough. I've actually got 2 other books by Tom Rob Smith. I believe they are focusing on the same main character as well, Leo. So I'll be interested to get to them in the fairly near future as well, because this was just a novel that I cannot recommend enough. It was fantastic in virtually every way. Then we have the second novel by Joe Nesbo, this time Nemesis. And unlike the previous novel, I really didn't like this one at all. This is about a series of bank robberies. In the first bank robbery, somebody gets murdered. Harry is told to investigate. because obviously he's a murder detective, and let's just say things don't go quite the way he thinks. Obviously there are twists and turns and such. Some of them you can predict, some of them you can't again. However, this one didn't work out for me as well as the Devil's Star, because it felt a bit long in places, a bit drawn out. I think I was getting a bit bored by the end of the book, which for a sort of detective thriller is not a good place to be. You don't want to be getting bored by the end of the book. That's not the point of them. With this, it kind of was, because the crimes and the way it's investigated in this one, it didn't quite work for me somehow. I don't know why. I can't even put into words exactly why it didn't work. I'm still not sure myself. But the last one was faster paced. It was the elements all clicked. In this, it felt a little bit disjointed, I think it was. So it didn't work for me. But you know, with these sort of detective thrillers, I get the impression, obviously I'm no expert, that this is often the case. And finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is not just one book, but it is, of course, T. Pratchett and the Discworld. Because yes, my T. Pratchett project, as I said at the start of the year, is continuing. And I have read this month Pyramids, which is basically T. Pratchett being sarcastic about Egypt and the pyramids and the whole society there. This is an interesting one which I'll do a separate review of course, same as all the other Discworld books here. That's why I'm not going to say too much now. But suffice to say, this is fun and enjoyable, and it's Discworld, and I loved it overall. The next novel is Guard's Guard. This is the first of the City Watch novels, of which I am a big fan. Essentially, a dragon terrorises the city of Ankh-Morpork, which is essentially a version of London and New York combined, sort of. It's fun, fast-paced. The characters of the Watch are brilliant, personally, and again, I'll do a separate review of this one. The next novel is Eric. This one is another Rincewind novel. This is set after the events of the last Invincible novel, Sorcery. He ends that novel in a strange place, let's say. In this one, essentially, there is a demonologist who is a teenage one. He is trying to be a demonologist at any rate, and he doesn't do it very well, because when he tries to summon a demon, instead he summons Rincewind, the failed wizard. And let's just say they go on a series of strange adventures. It's a very short Discworld novel. It's actually the shortest novel of all of them. It's just fun and fast paced, and it's just like a little, to me, a little additional novel to explain the events after what happened in Sorcery, but just a little bit of fun and enjoyment, and a few little additions to the overall Discworld world as well, like the fact they go to hell in it. Literally, they go to hell, you know, with all of its interesting additions, let's say. I mean, this is T. Pratchett, so Discworld hell is odd. Anyway, and the final Discworld book that I read was Moving Pictures. This is about basically Hollywood and the silver screen, the movie camera, and obviously the cinema is invented essentially in a very strange way, because this is very much about belief and what you think is what comes alive, and it doesn't turn out that well for certain people in the novel. It's fun, it's mad, and it's a novel that I personally am a big fan of. I know not all Discworld novels work for everybody. Of course, some of the topics that T. Pratchett deals with are not ones that appeal to everybody. You know, some are hit or miss. This is one that works for me. Well, every Discworld novel works for me, and that is not purely just it though, because I also happen to read and look at the pictures for Guard's Guard, the graphic novel. This is a big graphic novel that I bought years ago. I believe this is actually kind of expensive nowadays, from what I've heard, to buy. Thankfully, I bought it when it was fairly new many years ago, and it's horribly shiny as well, which is kind of annoying on camera. And suffice to say that this is, I can try to show you some pictures. there. This is, I think, the best of the graphic novels so far. It is the last graphic novel that I will be showing and reading for a while, because the next time they do anything graphical for Discworld is a lot later in the series. It will be at least 3 or 4 months, I think, until I get to the next one, which I have. But suffice to say, overall, Discworld books are brilliant. I will do individual reviews of all of them, and I just enjoyed them immensely. I mean, if you want fun fantasy novels with a mad world, then you should read Discworld by Pratchett. And if you just want a brilliant novel, read Discworld by Pratchett. Or just want to do any kind of reading, then read them as well, because I'm a big Pratchett fan. And I would recommend his books to near enough everybody, including children, because I read these books as children, so I can't recommend them enough. And with that said, that is it for this video. So, if you've read any of these novels, I'm not going to try and pick all the rest up because they've already fallen over in a big heap over there, then please leave me a comment and we can have a talk about it. If you have any suggestions based on books you think I might like based on any of these, and again, please leave a comment. I'm always interested in learning about new books and hopefully discovering new authors and such. And with that said, that is it for this video. And obviously, links to anything that I mentioned in this video, along with all my social media links, can be found in the description box below. And with that said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.